From time to time, I see people talk about leads in a way that I think misunderstands them, or at least doesn't exactly get a full picture of their purpose or what their purpose can be. There have been posts on the forums where people post viability rankings or a tier list of leads, and I just think if you're thinking about leads in that sense, there's just not really a point to that, and you're probably missing out on a lot of nuance and consideration. I've seen less experienced players say, I've got Zapdos on my team, and I've been told by someone that Zapdos is the best lead in the game, so I'm going to make that my lead on this team. And, maybe coincidentally, Zapdos is the best lead on that team. And, of course, Zapdos is an amazing lead, but when you're deciding what to lead, you should be thinking about what is my team's main game plan to win the game, and what early sequences I can make to best start executing my game plan, and how does my lead contribute to that. And of course, common lead matchups and sequences are considered when thinking about all of this, and maybe in the future I'll make a video just discussing common lead matchups and some of the nuances behind them. But for now, I thought I'd just illustrate what I'm talking about with some examples. Here's probably the most simple example of what I'm talking about, and if you're familiar with ADV, I'm sure you've seen. Rob Jr. here has a lead Metagross, and what does his early game sequencing look like? He just clicks Explosion. Very, very simple way for an offensive team to both speed up the game and eliminate a potentially key target right away. In this case, it gets pretty much the dream scenario of a lead Tyranitar that switches to a Skarmory. Now the Skarmory is gone, and look at these teammates that Rob Jr. has that no longer has to deal with Skarm. He's got Snorlax, which is normally Spike and Roar bait for Skarm, Regirock, which can wear down Skarm but isn't exactly doing big immediate damage. He's got Suicune, which now can set up and sleep freely without getting roared away by Skarm. Claydol normally walled by Skarm, and later he'll reveal a Gyarados, also, normally walled by Skarm. And this team probably has different plans based on the leads it faces. If it faces a Zapdos, I'd bet it would be happy to just Rock Slide and trade. This team, would also absolutely love to have Zapdos out of the picture immediately. So you get the idea behind that one. Very simple, very classic, effective lead and lead sequencing for an offense team. This is a team with a very classic and simple example of a lead Zapdos that sadly CS is using. One of the main things about lead Zapdos is that it usually intends to immediately start trading into opposing lead Zapdos. And this is a trade that Sadly's team is very happy to do because they've got a Suicune in the back, so immediately chipping down one of Suicune's big checks is obviously very nice. Sadly also has a Gengar in the back that similarly appreciates Zap's health being depleted. And of course, one of the great things about lead Zapdos is it can simply opt to Baton Pass out of its bad matchups and essentially reset the lead matchup. In this case, if Sadly's team faced a lead Tyranitar, you'd probably just BP to Suicune and start exerting the offensive pressure that way. This is a team with a very offensive game plan, and Zap, of course, can also force the opponent to reveal their special check early, and then Zap can catch it with Baton Pass and trap and remove it with Dugtrio. Very simple game plan, but can be very effective. Next is a lead Tyranitar by Bad Dummy. This is one that seems very simple as well, but this one in particular actually has a fair bit going on and is quite brilliant. So Skarmory is very prevalent in ADV, and people want to get spikes up as soon as possible. So one of the very first things you want to do when you think about your early game sequencing is your response to an early Skarmory. Generally, you're going to want to make sure you're denying Skarmory from getting multiple layers for relatively little cost, or like in the case of this team from Bad Dummy, denying early spikes entirely. Dummies T-Tar here is Rock Slide, Earthquake, Taunt, and Toxic. And one very common sequence in ADV is that both players lead with Tyranitar, and on turn 1 they both go to Skarmory and start trading spikes. Skarmory has a pretty free entry on lead T-Tar to, at the very least, come in and do some scouting on what its set is, and usually get one layer of spikes up. And for that reason, a lead T-Tar can't really afford to click Earthquake turn 1 facing an opposing lead T-Tar, because if the opponent goes Skarm, you're left having done nothing and having a full health Skarmory with free reign. But with Badomi's Tar set here, you can just click EQ versus opposing Tar, because if they immediately go Skarm, you simply taunt and they're forced to switch. And the absolute best scenario from there is they switch to a Swampert as you click Toxic on the taunted Skarm, and then you've got an early Toxic Swampert, which is huge for executing this team's game plan because it has a Jirachi with Sub, Calm Mind, Thunderbolt, and Ice Punch, and one of the big checks to that set is Swampert. So getting that Toxic is huge, and one of the other big checks to that Jirachi set is Tyranitar. So if the opposing T-Tar you face on turn 1 is a Tar set that also opts to stay in on that matchup, then the EQ damage that you get on it will be very important for your Jirachi later as well. Here's one with a little more of an off-the-wall lead choice. McMegan is using a team with a lead Swampert. Definitely not super common, but on this team it works perfectly. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, where giving early free Skarm entry is not what you want to do. That is clearly something you have to worry about with Swampert, but here on this team you don't particularly care if they opt to immediately go to Skarm, because you have Fortress, and in fact with lead Swampert you can freely go immediately to Fortress versus most common leads. If they lead Tyranitar, you can immediately go to Fortress, and you'll likely have a good matchup to start spiking up against with whatever the Tar switch to. It's a little bit less ideal if the Tar decides to stay in and use Hidden Power Grasp, but not a super big deal because it's not like it costs you any Fortress health, and you got info about the Tar set, and you can simply switch the Fortress out to something to wall a mixed Tar, probably the especially defensive Zapdos on this team. If you face a lead Salamence, they have to respect that they can't OHKO you and are fearing Ice Beam, so you can immediately go Fortress on that as well and start spiking. Versus lead Zap, you can technically go immediately Fortress on that even, but I'd probably recommend just going to your own Zapdos, and since, again, you're especially defensive with Rest, you are fine trading down, and you can save your 4 for later. In this game you saw he faced a lead Metagross and got to just protect and completely deny whatever the Metagross wanted to do. The whole design here is about getting Fortress in early with no stress and start getting your own spikes while denying the opponent's spikes. Surely I'd be silly not to talk about lead Dugtrio, since that's one that's causing a lot of curiosity and talk lately. It's actually a simple idea, but I will stress that it's pretty specific. You need the proper teammates to deal with both the leads that Dugtrio can't deal with, but also, even in the matchups Doug does want, you need the teammates that deal with the follow-up in a good way. So the idea is you face lead Tyranitar or Metagross, and you get rid of them. You EV to live any physical attack from Tar, and you remove it, and then you've got something in the back with Weather Clear. In this case, a Rain Dance Claydol, and you've got Rest Suicune, and also in this case, a Rest Snorlax, which both love the removal of sand. Or if you caught a lead Metagross, the removal of Metagross's explosion from stopping their sweep. So the upside to immediately getting rid of Tar or Meta is quite obvious and quite big for this team. The downside is, what if it's not facing lead Tar or Meta? Well, the idea is that you're comfortable with it because you have a really strong backbone that deals with those leads without giving up too much. Depending on the team, ABR would have multiple spinners, so a Scarm switch or Scarm follow-up wasn't crippling, and again to support the rest sweepers. You've got physically defensive Suicune, which can at least switch into every lead Salamence. In this case, you've got Snorlax, which can deal with lead Zapdos and not fear immediately being trapped by Dugtrio. Again, this is the idea anyways. You can see the obvious strengths of it in this game. ABR Suicune actually got crit, but it just didn't matter at all. Once Sand was gone, it was going to be almost impossible from stopping the Snorlax from eventually getting out of hand. So I hope this video was illuminating and maybe inspiring for you to think about how to deploy your leads on your teams and how powerful good early game sequencing can be. Thanks for watching.